그런 격언, 뭐 속담 같은 것이 이제 slow and steady means the race라는 말이고요. 그래서 천천히 하지만 이렇게 꾸준히 하면 뭔가 우리가 목표로 했던 것들을 다 도달할 수 있다라는 그런 생각을 가지고 학생들한테도 그렇게 가르치고 있고 저도 뭐 그런 생각을 가지고 연구를 수행하고 있습니다. 저는 과학이라는 것이, 연구라는 것이 뭔가 잘 이루어지고 예상되는 것을 하는 것이 아니라 잘 안 되고 우리가 해결하기 어려운 문제를 푸는 것이라고 생각합니다. 그래서 가능성이 적더라도 우리가 시도를 하고 노력을 하면 그 가능성을 열 수 있는 그런 것이 저희 연구의 어떤 철학입니다. 그래서 가능성이 있어 도전하는 것이 아니라 도전하면 가능성이 생긴다라고 적었습니다.
There is no greater blessing than to have good health as you grow old. Even though my mom is over 70, she is peppy and full of energy. One day, our family started practicing Taekwondo, and it turned out to be a special blessing for us. Taekwondo family, return to happiness.
옛날에는 택시부터 시작해가지고 버스, 덤프트럭, 낮과 밤이 없이 몸이 부서지도록 일을 했죠. 그러다 보니까 몸이 많이 망가졌어요. 허리 협착증도 생겼고 무릎도 아프고 이제는 내 삶이 다 됐는갑다 생각을 하고 사는 것도 싫고 완전 좌절을 했죠.
지팡이를 짚고 다니실 만큼 근력이 약해지셔가지고 너무 힘들었는데 우연찮게 실버 태권도라는 거를 알게 되셨어요.
다리도 안 올라갔거든요, 솔직히. 근데 64세부터 태권도를 해서 7년째 하고 있습니다.
인상도 너무 밝아지셨고 빨리 가고 싶다고 하시고 도복을 보면서 흐뭇해 하시더라고요. 그때부터 어머니의 삶이 다시 시작이 된 것 같고 지팡이를 안 짚기 시작하셨어요. 그게 진짜 놀라운 변화인 것 같습니다.
어르신들이 운동을 통해서 노년을 건강한 생활을 할 수 있게끔 도와주는 게 바로 저는 태권도라고 생각이 듭니다.
Not only did Mother experience this change, but her fellow teammates also felt reborn due to the dramatic change in their lives.
너무 좋아요. 온 세상을 다 얻은 것 같죠. 제가 태권도 전도사가 된 것 같아요.
열정이 높으신 분이죠. 그 가족 전체가 태권도 가족입니다. 아주 화목하고 건강이 넘치는 대한민국의 대표적인 태권도 가족이 아닌가 싶습니다.
We're a family that loves practicing Taekwondo, so we've embarked on a new challenge.
사실 저희 가족들이 아픔이 정말 많습니다. 제가 아침에 일어났는데 반신이 마비가 왔었고 저희 아이는 태어나자마자 인공 심박기를 달았었고 정상으로도 살기 힘들다는 진단을 받았었지만 이 아이를 보면서 기적이라는 것을 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok is set to meet with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent next week in Washington for trade agenda talks, as the American official in charge of Trump tariffs requested a meeting. The U.S. has put a curb on the export of Nvidia's H20 chips to China, apparently ratcheting up pressure on Beijing in the height of their trade tensions. Curtains are up for presidential primary races. 3 preliminary candidates will be vying for the Democratic Party, and 8 out of 11 for the People Power Party. It's April 16th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok will meet with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Washington next week for trade talks. This comes at the invitation of the U.S. Treasury Department, as the Trump administration looks to be speeding up negotiations with certain trading partners. Shin Se-byuk has the latest.
South Korean Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok is set to visit the U.S. next week for trade talks with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Seoul's finance ministry said on Wednesday that Choi's trip comes in response to a meeting proposal from Washington's Treasury chief. The meeting is expected to take place on the sidelines of Choi's visit to Washington, D.C. next week for the G20 finance ministers meeting. Key agenda items for the meeting will include trade issues, which have emerged as a key point of contention between the two allies, as well as monetary and foreign exchange matters. Seoul said the final schedule and list of participants for the meeting are still under review. The report follows Bessent's interview with Bloomberg TV on Monday, where he said Washington would hold trade negotiations with South Korea next week. The Wall Street Journal also reported earlier this week that the Trump administration is prioritizing negotiations with 5 countries, namely South Korea, the UK, Australia, Japan, and India. An expert says the White House is looking to secure early deals with countries more open to dialogue before moving on to more difficult trading partners.
South Korea is one of the 5 countries included because, aside from Mexico and Canada, it's the most eager among major trade surplus nations to reach a deal with the U.S.
Seoul is reportedly preparing a proposal for Washington that outlines efforts to balance trade and reduce non-tariff barriers as part of its strategy to minimize tariff burdens on key export sectors like automobiles, steel, and semiconductors. The plan is expected to include a 2-track approach, boosting imports of U.S. goods such as natural gas, crude oil, and agricultural products, while increasing production of major South Korean exports like cars and chips in the U.S. Meanwhile, Seoul's Trade Minister An Duk-eun is also expected to visit the U.S. as early as next week for negotiations with Washington. The trip follows acting President Han Duck-soo's announcement on Monday that a delegation led by An will be dispatched to initiate trade talks with the U.S. Minister An previously traveled to the U.S. in February and March, shortly after the launch of the Trump administration, to deliver Seoul's position on Washington's proposed tariff plans. 신새벽 아리랑 뉴스.
The U.S. has put a restriction on the export of Nvidia's H20 chips to China amid their trade tensions. After the news, the chip giant saw its stocks fall sharply. Moon Ji-young reports.
The Trump administration is seemingly enhancing its curbs on China amid escalating trade tensions. One significant action taken is restricting Nvidia from selling its H20 chips, which have been among its most popular products, to China. Nvidia stated on Tuesday that the Trump administration privately informed them last week that selling the H20 to China would require a license, quote, for the indefinite future. According to Nvidia, the new regulation addresses Washington's concerns that the covered products may be used in or diverted to a supercomputer in China. The AI chip giant warned that it expects to report about $5.5 billion in write-downs due to inventory issues, and the new rule will also hinder a product line specifically designed for China to comply with previous U.S. restrictions. Following this announcement, Nvidia's stock fell by 6.3% in after-hours trading, despite having gained 1.3% during regular trading hours on the New York Stock Exchange. Meanwhile, the announcement follows Nvidia's commitment made on Monday to invest $500 billion in AI infrastructure in the U.S. over the next 4 years.
I believe the U.S. intends to convey that if we allow China's manufacturing capabilities to grow without significant obstacles, we risk losing our own manufacturing base. This situation seems to evoke a sense of crisis among us.
Additionally, the trade showdown is spilling over to Chinese stocks listed in the U.S. According to Politico, U.S. administration officials are considering actions to delist nearly 300 Chinese firms trading on U.S. exchanges. When asked about this potential during an interview with Fox Business last week, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated, quote, everything is on the table. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, trade officials from the EU and their U.S. counterparts began their talks, which appear to have reaffirmed their differences, with a focus on removing tariffs on all industrial goods proposed by the EU. Park Go-nu explains.
EU trade officials met with their U.S. counterparts in Washington, D.C. on Monday to reach a deal on tariffs, but were unable to bridge gaps in their stances on trade. According to the European Commission on Tuesday, the EU's proposal of 040 reciprocal tariffs on industrial goods, including cars, along with non-tariff barriers, were among the main items on the agenda. It added talks about overcapacity in steel and aluminum, and the resilience of supply chains in semiconductors and pharmaceutical sectors were also part of the talks. And the EU emphasized it would not budge on standards, standing firm on red lines including food, health, and safety, as well as regulations regarding technology and the digital market. European Commission spokesperson Olive Gill urged the U.S. to clarify its stance, saying the EU is doing its part and more engagement from Washington is needed to keep the process moving. Following Monday's meeting, EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic posted on social media saying a significant joint effort from both sides would be needed to reach a fair deal, adding that the EU is ready. Officials from the U.S. Trade Representative's office reportedly did not respond to requests for comments on the U.S. stance following the meeting. With the EU's 90-day pause on retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods set to last until July 14th, EU officials say further measures are also being discussed internally in case no agreement is reached by then. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
South Korea's Constitutional Court has suspended acting President Han Duck-soo's nominations for 2 Constitutional Court justices. On Tuesday, the court upheld an injunction filed by lawyer Kim Jong-un, temporarily blocking Han's picks, Government Legislation Minister Lee Wan-gyu, and senior Seoul High Court Judge Ham Sang-hoon The nominations are now on hold until the court rules on whether an acting president has the authority to make such appointments. The case was filed after strong backlash from the Democratic Party and National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik, who accused acting President Han of trying to stack the bench before a new president is elected. 2 justices retire from the bench this week, leaving just 7 out of 9. In a statement, Han's office said the government respects the court's ruling and will await the final judgment. Turning to the presidential primaries, the Democratic Party has a total of 3 contenders competing for the Liberal Party ticket to the top office, with their focus on the economy. Our correspondent Shin Ha-yong reports.
As the Democratic Party kicks off its primary race for the 21st presidential election, its 3 preliminary candidates pledged to compete fairly and come together after the race. On Wednesday, former party leader Lee Jae-myung, Kim Kyung-soo, former Gyeongsang-do Province governor, and Kim Dong-yeon, current Gyeonggi-do Province governor, made their first joint appearance since registering for the primary.
For a better life for the people and a hopeful future, the DP and our candidate, whoever that may be, must win this election.
I hope this primary will be a chance to fully showcase the DP's experience and capability.
I will give my best through fierce competition and come together to bring real change, beyond just a change in government.
Starting Wednesday, the party will run 4 primaries through April 27th. Chungcheong-do, Gyeongsang-do, Jeolla-do provinces, and the Seoul metropolitan area alongside Gangwon-do province and Jeju. During the regional primaries, dues-paying party members and party delegates will cast their votes, which will account for 50% of the total in selecting the presidential candidate. On the last day in each region, the voting results will be announced. Public polls will be conducted for 2 days, sometimes between April 21st and 27th, and these will account for the remaining 50%. The final candidate will be confirmed on April 27th. All 3 candidates are focusing their policy visions on the economy. Lee Jae-myung's think tank officially launched on Wednesday, outlining a national vision that aims for 3% potential growth, becoming one of the world's top 4 exporters, and creating a gross national income per capita of $50,000 by 2030. Kim Kyung-soo announced his economic policy focused on boosting the AI industry and promoting balanced regional growth, promising 100 trillion Korean won, around $70 billion, in public-private investment over the next 5 years to secure AI leadership and drive industrial change. Kim Dong-yeon, meanwhile, has been emphasizing the so-called 5 big deals to differentiate his economic policies, which includes focusing on balanced regional growth, climate change, and tax reform. Shin Ha-yong, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the People Power Party has a total of 8 candidates, hoping to win the partisan primary election to regain the reins of the top office. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
After closing the registration for the presidential primary, the People Power Party on Wednesday named 8 contestants after cutting 3 of the registered but not well-known names for not being up to the public's expectations and standards. As expected, the 8 are Kim Mun-soo, the latest labor minister, 5-term lawmaker Na Kyung-won, 4-term lawmaker An Chol-soo, former lawmaker Yang Yang-ja, Incheon Mayor Yu Jong-bok, Gyeongsang-do Province Governor Lee Cheol-woo, former PPP Chair Han Dong-hun, the latest Daegu Mayor Hong Jun-pyo. The chair of PPP's election committee emphasized that it'll manage a fair election.
As election committee chair, I will work with my team to ensure each candidate can freely present their vision in an open, energetic atmosphere. Through honest debate, we aim to select a candidate the people can truly trust to lead the nation.
Without a clear frontrunner, a fierce competition awaits the contestants, but some touch of fun awaits as well to garner support from the young generations. This includes heart monitoring during debates, speed round questions, and self-introductions based on MBTIs. All in all, however, Hwang emphasized party unity amid what could be seen as an uphill battle, an election after its former president was impeached.
Harmony and unity are our core values. To win the public's trust, every candidate must unite, work together, and move forward as one team.
Meanwhile, the 8 contestants released their pledges and were doing media interviews on Wednesday. However, an unexpected key figure was in the spotlight. Seoul Mayor Oh Se-won, who pulled out from the primaries, became a popular person to meet. Starting with dinner with Hong Jun-pyo on Tuesday night, the Seoul mayor met with Kim Mun-soo on Wednesday for breakfast, Na Kyung-won in the morning, and An Chul-soo for lunch. The candidates emphasized their visions aligned with the mayor's, which was focused on growth and helping the weak initially when he launched his campaign. This is largely seen as a message to Oh's supporters as he's not in the race anymore. Meanwhile, Han Dong-un visited Daegu on Wednesday. Daegu is a conservative stronghold with many eligible electors that account for 50% of the final votes. Meanwhile, after a media day for the candidates on Thursday, series of debates will be held through the weekend. Based on the debates, 4 will survive the cutoff for the next round starting April 22nd. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Today marks the 11th anniversary of the Sewol ferry disaster, which claimed 304 lives. Memorial services were held nationwide, including in Ansan City, home to Danwon High School. At 4:16 p.m., a moment of silence was observed as a siren sounded across Ansan, from where 261 victims, mostly students and teachers from Danwon High School, were lost. The remembrance ceremony began at 3 p.m. with survivors, family members, and citizens paying tributes and reading letters to the lost. Similar services were held in Incheon, Seoul, and other cities as the country remembers the victims. In other news, there are convenience stores here in Seoul that are working to fight loneliness and social isolation by offering hot meals and lending a sympathetic ear. Our Choi Soo-hyung shares their story.
Soup is cooked in a simple instant cooker. Neighbors gather to chat and share warm food, enjoying a comforting lunch together. This is Mind Convenience Store, a place run by the Seoul Metropolitan Government and local district offices. Here, anyone can come in and enjoy a free meal. For those living alone, this store becomes a cozy, welcoming space.
I really like it. We get to enjoy a nice cup of tea and have delightful chats with other seniors. It's all just so nice.
A report from the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs last year found that nearly 80% of single-person households in the country are at risk of dying alone. The government created this space to overcome loneliness by fostering small local communities with the power of togetherness. With donated goods from private businesses, the store offers not only shared meals but also programs to ease loneliness and prevent social isolation. Through a self-test, people can assess their loneliness, and social workers are on-site for immediate support if needed.
Visitors can assess their loneliness, and if needed, they go through an additional checklist that looks at daily life and potential crisis areas. Based on the results, we provide counseling or connect them to special programs offered at Mind Convenience Store, all through a one-stop support system.
Starting in late March, it has now opened in 4 districts across Seoul in Gangbuk-gu, Do-bong-gu, Gwanak-gu, and Dongdaemun-gu. Though it's only been open about 3 weeks, the Do-bong-gu store is already welcoming over 60 local residents a day.
Until now, we didn't have many cozy spaces in the area where locals could gather and talk like this. But the response from the residents has been even better than expected. They are happy to have a place that's comfortable and easy to use.
The stores plan to launch many programs that will not only target the elderly, but also include young adults and middle-aged groups. In addition, the Seoul Metropolitan Government plans to open more Mind Convenience stores, aiming to have 1 in each district by 2027. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Abandoned mines have an environment similar to that of the moon's poles. For this reason, they are transformed into a testbed for space research. Cha Yoon-kyung tells us how.
The researchers say that abandoned mines have a similar environment to space, as they have less oxygen and remain at low temperatures. They use them as testbed environments to simulate the moon and explore possible training exercises with experimental equipment. In the closed mines, it is possible to check whether all sorts of facilities can operate well on a bumpy surface. The researchers test drills for lunar soil exploration and sample collection before going into space. They also experiment with various technologies for space resources, such as CubeSats for very low Earth orbit and real-time spectrum analyzers for cosmic rays.
The environment of abandoned mines is quite similar to that on the moon. So it is feasible to carry out dangerous experiments like analyzing electric power generation in closed mines without any interruption.
Aside from conducting verification tests for space equipment, the research team is also planning to create a space resource convergence demonstration complex in Taebaek this year and make abandoned mines leading space resources platforms.
Here in closed mines, we are planning to run equipment which collects helium-3 that can be the main source of electrical energy in the future. Then we will actually go to the moon and collect helium-3 after testing everything in advance.
The research team is planning to load space equipment in a lunar lander that is being independently developed based on resources from the verification experiments by 2032. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
It felt a little hot today as the temperatures rose significantly during the day. Most of the areas that appear yellow on the map exceeded 20 degrees Celsius today. Some areas in the Gyeongsang-do Provinces, which are red on the map, felt even hotter, with Kimcheon reaching 27 degrees. Seoul will become even warmer tomorrow, with the daytime temperature reaching up to 24 degrees. Meanwhile, there is some light rain forecast in southern parts of Gyeonggi-do Province and Gangwon-do Province tomorrow. On Saturday night, more rain is forecast in most parts of the country, starting with the Seoul metropolitan area and western parts of Gangwon-do Province. Tomorrow morning will start warm with Seoul and Daegu at 13 degrees, Jeju at 16 degrees. Highs will move up to 27 degrees in Daejeon, 19 degrees in Busan. For the time being, temperature swings will appear across the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
set the facts straight. Get Korea right. K-culture is sweeping the globe. K-pop, K-drama, K-movie, K-food, and even K-beauty. Korean cultural content is gaining more and more fans worldwide. It's indeed the golden age of K-culture. But with this growing interest comes an increase in misinformation about Korea. There's so much inaccurate information out there. Even AI can sometimes get it wrong. So, we must set things straight and correct all the misinformation. So here's the plan. The Voluntary Agency Network of Korea, Bank, and Arirang TV present the Get Korea Right project. Our goal is to provide accurate information on important keywords that come to mind when we think of Korea. Blatant errors and false claims that distort history. It's time to set the record straight, sharing the true history and culture of Korea while raising the national brand. Let's get started with Get Korea Right. Are you ready to join?
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. North Korea recently marked the Day of the Sun, the birthday of its founding leader Kim Il-sung, with large-scale celebrations and praise for both past and present leadership. But pundits say that Kim Jong-un didn't make his usual public visit to the family mausoleum, possibly signaling continued efforts to emphasize his own authority over dynastic tradition. At the same time, the regime is amplifying propaganda that highlights Kim's ideological leadership and policy achievements, positioning him as a central figure shaping North Korea's future. Amid this, Seoul and Washington, the allies signed a new combined war plan, the first major update in nearly a decade, aimed at countering North Korea's advancing nuclear and missile capabilities. To delve deeper into the situation on the Korean Peninsula, we connect to Ko Myung-hyun, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy, on the phone. Welcome, Dr. Go.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us online is Mark Barry, Associate Editor Emeritus at International Journal on World Peace. Great to have you, Dr. Barry.
Thank you and good evening.
So let's start with Dr. Barry. So this year, like I've said, North Korea appears to be reviving some kind of stronger public references to the Day of the Sun. Given that you've met yourself, founder Kim Il-sung, in 1994 during the first nuclear crisis with the U.S., what do you make of this renewed emphasis, and what does it suggest about the regime's current propaganda strategy regarding the Kim dynasty?
Well, coincidentally, I met Kim on this very day 31 years ago, and it was months, weeks, in fact, before he unexpectedly passed away. I was staffing a delegation of former heads of state and government, which was led by a former president of Costa Rica, a former prime minister of Egypt, and the former governor general of Canada. And we also had TV crews from CNN and Japan's NHK. And Kim definitely came across as healthy at that time, but he readily admitted that it was his son who was essentially in charge of the country. But when it came to foreign relations with the United States, with Japan, with China, with Russia, that was still his area of prerogative. And he came across truly as someone who very credibly was capable of dealing with people like Stalin, like Mao, and the non-aligned world at that time of the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, etc. So that's the root of the regime. And for Kim Jong-un, it's important to always exalt, in a sense, the root of the regime. But at the same time, my impression of Kim is that his first meetings with Trump, for example, were before the age of 40. So having achieved the age of 40, I believe, last year, I think now he can afford to look more mature, more in a leadership role. He can afford not to show up to the mausoleum on April 15th, as he has not done for the past 3 years, although he has done it on other occasions over the past several years. So it's not like he doesn't show up. So my feeling is he always has to connect to the root, but at the same time, he's trying to demonstrate that he's his own man. But I would just simply add that the people around Kim Il-sung were of extraordinary capability, who were able to deal with Stalin's people, with Mao's people, and in many ways Kim Jong-un has yet to demonstrate that his people can be both as talented and reliable and as solid as the people who surrounded his grandfather.
Right. So, well, that's a very valuable insight, especially given your personal encounter with Kim Il-sung. So it does really seem like the regime is walking a fine line between past legacy and also Kim Jong-un's personal authority now. Now, let's also bring in Dr. Go into the conversation. So the regime stresses Kim Jong-un's role in developing 주체 and other ideological frameworks. Could you explain for us how significant are these efforts in securing ideological legitimacy, and are they resonating with the current North Korean population?
Well, first of all, Kim Jong-un was too young when Juche ideology was formulated back in the 50s and 60s, and evolved further in the 70s and essentially completed this ideological development in the 1980s. So North Korea has this Juche ideology that emphasizes self-reliance and the idea that the people's will is being embodied in the figure of the Suryong, or the leader of the country, and therefore it justifies the eternal dictatorship of the Kim dynasty in North Korea. So in that sense, Kim Jong-un inherited this ideological tradition, and this is very important because this ideology, which essentially is being repeated over and over through different ceremonies, rituals, propaganda, as well as the weekly ideological teaching seminars that everybody in North Korea have to attend. It's essentially being indoctrinated into the entire North Korean society. And because people are being indoctrinated with the idea that they themselves, the North Koreans, are part of this organic body politics of the North Korean regime, which is headed by the Kims, not just Kim Jong-un, but the entire Kim family. It makes very natural for the North Korean public to accept the Kim Jong-un as their perennial leader. And this idea, I think, is a very powerful notion that allows the regime to sustain all this, essentially to face all these crises that they have to face every time that they have to engage with the outside world. When they develop nuclear weapons, there are sanctions, but then with a very strong ideological cohesion, then they can withstand the pressure that's coming from the outside, and also that the permanent economic crisis that North Korea is under. So I think in that sense, I think the ideology, in a way, is one of the most important factors that explains the survival of the regime, as well as the fact that North Korea has been able to withstand all the outside pressure they are subject to.
Right, so this ideology actually still plays into power consolidation. Let's now shift to what's happening outside of North Korea's borders. On that same day, the Day of the Sun, the U.S. flew a B-1B strategic bomber over the Korean peninsula in a joint drill with South Korea. Dr. Barry, could you explain for us what kind of message is Washington trying to send with this action?
Well, obviously, it coincided with Kim Il-sung's birth anniversary. But from time to time, B-1Bs do fly over the width of the peninsula on the South Korean side. It's always sending a message. But the funny thing is that if you had taken a flight to Mars in October of 2024 and come back, you'd think that Biden or Harris were still president, because America's demonstrated a policy towards North Korea seems to be unchanged. The military exercises are the same. And in fact, the March exercises combined between South Korea and the U.S. targeted, in a sense, attacking North Korea, assuming the South were attacked, and even attacking underground tunnels that led to residences where Kim Jong-un might hide out. So if you turn this situation around, and if you look at the situation from Kim Jong-un's point of view, the most odious thing that the United States and South Korea do towards North Korea are not the sanctions, are not many of the other things that go on, but it's the exercises, because they are explicitly aimed at removing the regime under circumstances that the allies agree would be warranted. So to me, that situation is unchanged, and I think President Trump is doing it simply to show that, look, this is not my first term, and in terms of my second term, we're back to square one. But hopefully, once the Ukraine war situation is somewhat settled, or at least put into more of an hibernation status, maybe you and I will get around to having discussions about reducing these allied troop exercises and discussing sanctions and literally picking up where we left off. But right now, it's as if the Biden administration had continued.
Right, so it's definitely a message, a gesture coming from the new Trump administration.
Yes.
Now, amid this, Dr. Barry, U.S. Forces Korea just confirmed that Washington and Seoul have signed a brand new combined war plan. It replaces the older 2015-era plan and reflects the evolution of North Korea's weapons and South Korea's military reforms. Why was this update actually necessary, and what's changed in the threat landscape over the past decade?
Well, the nuclear capability and the delivery capability has increased, but this is something that is not so much a reflection of changes of administration at the presidential level, but it reflects the discussions between the Commander-in-Chief of Combined Forces Command, U.S. Forces Korea, and people like Admiral Paparo, head of Indo-Pacific Command in Honolulu, in terms of what is the appropriate response and how do you move assets around, whether it's aircraft carriers, whether it's submarines, and certainly the on-the-ground response of the two countries' respective armies and air forces. So that's strictly a military planning prerogative, and but it just underscores that the readiness is always being modernized, and it takes everything into account. Ironically, you know, there's almost double the number of U.S. troops in Japan, but there's a lot less publicity about what sort of readiness and exercises U.S. troops undertake by themselves or with the Japanese self-defense forces. But in Korea, it's always an effort on the American part to modernize the capabilities and the planning under the presumption of worst-case scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for giving us the context of the threat landscape, the evolvement of the threat landscape. Now to Dr. Go, experts say the new plan may be more offensive than past versions, envisioning rapid retaliatory strikes if North Korea launches missiles. Do you think this creates new deterrence, or do you think it risks preemptive escalation?
Well, I think the combination of the war plans, combining the conventional as well as non-conventional aspects of the potential conflict with North Korea, I think was very much necessary. I mean, it's not just to deter North Korea, but also to reassure South Korea that the United States remains committed to its defense. Having said that, I think it's inevitable that there will be a very aggressive response component in the war plan that is about defending South Korea against North Korean threats, which, as you said, could increase the risk of preemptive escalation on the part of North Korea. The reason why this is necessary is because in the age of modern missiles that are very capable and they're very powerful, and they're so capable of evading missile defense systems that we can build with the present technology today. And then, so even the slight chance of a missile defense system not being able to intercept an oncoming missile from North Korea could be devastating, especially if the missile is headed towards Seoul metropolitan area, which is very densely populated. So in that sense, the risk is actually the downside risk way too high. So in that sense, I think given the lack of appropriate technological response to North Korea's missile capability, the best natural and logical response is to, in a way, up the ante on the against North Korea to remind them that the cost for them to attack South Korea is immense. So this is the best way to influence North Korean calculations before the conflict breaks out. So all these the escalatory measures and the strong response that's being promised by the allied forces against potential North Korean attack, these are notional. So it's a notional in order to influence North Korean calculations so that they never miscalculate in the direction of starting a conflict against the South.
Right. So, and this comes after North Korea has actually developed a lot of its technologies. Now, speaking of North Korea's technology development, there are increasing signs of deepened military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Dr. Barry, how likely is Kim Jong-un to appear at Russia's Victory Day parade? And what message would this send internationally if he stood alongside Putin and possibly Chinese leader Xi Jinping?
I know I've said on this program in previous months that that's exactly what Kim would like to do, and I really have to amend my remarks, which is the fact that he wants to go to Moscow. He wants the same prestige of doing what his father and grandfather were able to do, make trips to Moscow. But it was to do so in a bilateral way. He wants to meet with Putin. He wants to be able to be given a tour of Moscow, both the sightseeing and relevant military and scientific facilities and so forth. He doesn't want to appear on a dais watching a military parade with other foreign leaders. Least of all does he want to appear on a dais with President Xi, because President Xi will basically say to him, hey, boy, come here and bring your notepad. I have some instructions for you. So he just can't do that. Now, 10 years ago, on April 30th of 2015, he politely sent his regrets that he was not able to come and attend the military parade in 2015, that he had too many pressing matters at home. And I think that is, unfortunately for him, the most likely scenario, because the only other way he can attend the May 9th activities is to not attend the military parade, even though supposedly DPRK troops will be involved in the parade, and it would be very weird for him not to be on the dais for that. But I don't think Putin will hold bilateral meetings too early before May 9th or too soon after May 9th to accommodate Kim, although he might. And again, as your questions stressed earlier in this broadcast, the fact is that the North Korean ammunition and missiles have been indispensable. And in fact, the report issued yesterday that you noted in your newscast today between Reuters and London's Open Source Center about the indispensable role of ammunition, of which as many as 90% of the ammo provided to Russia has been given by North Korea. This has been indispensable help, and North Korea has been indispensable also in pushing back Ukrainian forces from most of the contested Kursk region of Russia. So for Kim ultimately not to show up because Putin wouldn't accommodate Kim in the way that he wants, and for Kim to be able to stay home actually raises a larger question in my mind, which is what's the future of the Russian DPRK alliance? Because no matter what's written in paper, it's the relationship between the two leaders that's going to count for the most.
Right. So we really will have to see how these the ties between the two leaders would develop. Now, speaking of which, Dr. Go, there are reports of weapons, technology exchanges, and even troop deployments to Russia. How would you evaluate this partnership between the two countries? And do you think this realignment would threaten regional or global stability in new ways?
So when at the beginning of this so-called alliance between Russia and North Korea, which was reaffirmed last year in June when Vladimir Putin, Russian president, visited North Korea to renew and update the mutual defense treaty between the two countries. Then at the moment, we believe that the alliance will be also, quote unquote, the partnership between these two countries will be essentially transactional. That essentially is icing on the cake, but then deep down the relationship was basically a weapon sale relationship between North Korea and Russia. Then North Korea will supply weapons such as artillery shells or even missiles. In exchange, Russia would provide economic assistance in addition to some weapons technology, plus the political prestige that the Russian president can confer to a leader of a country like North Korea. But now it looks like the Russians are pretty pleased with the effectiveness of the North Korean assistance, both in terms of weapons supplied as well as the manpower. In fact, the combat troops that have been deployed on behalf of Russia in the Kursk region to fight against the Ukrainians. I believe essentially this imbues the relationship with a very dynamic character, meaning that the Russians are now probably willing to evolve this partnership even further. So if before Russians are probably they have capped the expectation on how far this partnership in North Korea could develop. Now I think Russians are more invested in this relationship. That's why they're potentially bringing Kim Jong-un to Moscow through this invitation to attend the Victory Day parade. But also, I think Russians probably want to make this a partnership with North Korea more of a permanent alliance in the sense that the Russians and North Koreans could potentially coordinate their foreign policy as well as the security policy so that they can have this synergistic effect that especially deters the United States, not just in Europe, but also in this part of the world, in East Asia. So in that sense, I think that is a very worrisome development. And then I think that this is something that I think our allies and partners in the United States as well and look into this matter very closely so we can come out with we can formulate a counter strategy to ensure that these countries don't get any closer together.
Right, so this partnership doesn't really seem to be quite temporary. Now, there had been recent footage by Russian authorities confirming North Korean laborers who are inactive in Russian construction projects near, and this is a clear evidence of UN sanctions violations, of course. Dr. Berry, what do you think the international community can actually do in response to this?
Well, it's not only the construction projects, but it's, in fact, there was a report out of Moscow yesterday that Russia's equivalent of Amazon.com called Wildberries has been hiring up to several hundred North Korean workers. And when Wildberries was asked about whether these were North Koreans, they answered indirectly that, well, we're putting them through our training program and blah, blah, blah. But they didn't want to directly answer if these were North Korean citizens. And of course, when pressed, sometimes they'll privately say, well, they're Siberian, ethnically Asian-looking Russian citizens. So they won't admit that. But we used to have North Korean laborers pretty much exclusively working in the lumbering industry, and then increasingly in construction projects, some of which were well known before the sanctions reached the peak that they did. But the reality is that this is going to be part of the expansion of the relationship. But I should also note, and also in relationship to your previous question to me, when the former Defense Minister Shoigu visited Kim last month, his purpose was in many ways to reassure Kim, not only to extend an invitation to Moscow, but to reassure him because Kim is reportedly upset about the slow or laggard payment, both whether it be in currency or in food or oil or whatever. Also upset that Russia has not affirmed that they would not allow the two North Korean soldiers captured by Ukraine to be allowed to defect to South Korea. And finally, worst of all, I think Kim is upset and probably expressed to Shoigu that he's out of the loop in terms of what Putin is discussing and Putin's office is discussing with the Trump administration about ending the Ukraine war. And frankly, from Kim's point of view, he is a co-belligerent, not just simply providing so-called mercenaries. So if I were Kim, I'd realize, I begin to seriously think, who the heck is my friend in this world? And if it's not going to be Trump, if it's not going to be President Xi, if it's not going to be Putin, then maybe he has to start seriously thinking that maybe Korea is better off as a united country under some sort of leadership arrangement to be able to deal with the Putins and Xis and Trumps of this new world order that's emerging. But I think Kim is really seriously thinking, what's ahead for me? What's ahead for my country? What's ahead for the Korean people on both sides of the 38th parallel?
All right. Thank you so much for your insights. We'll have to wrap up our program here. Thank you again for bringing us your opinion and your time, Dr. Go and Dr. Berry. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you again.
Now, that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
About Korean cultural heritage?